And now we're going to get into something pretty epic that I think happened over the weekend. So there is an organization called Jewish Voices for Peace. And they have been very vocal. They've come out in support of the Palestinian people. And recently, over the weekend, they shut down Grand Central Station. I kid you not, guys, you got to see this. So many people out there. I don't know if you've been to Grand Central Station in New York, but I have. But they really shut things down. Look at the crowd. You see all the people in Grand Central Station. So they're saying, let Gaza live, ceasefire now. Now, does that sound like, are they cheering for Hamas? No, they're not. No, they're not. And they're Jewish. All right. So awesome stuff there. Now, as you could imagine, hundreds of them were arrested. I want to bring this up here. This is from Sophia Arman. Hundreds of Jewish Americans calling for ceasefire with Jewish Voices for Peace are getting arrested at Grand Central Station. And I want to show you this. So you see, they lined everybody up. Oh, by the way, to Bernie Sanders, these arrests, does that make them feel safe and secure? Mm-hmm. Now I want to pause and I want to say something here. Notice they have t-shirts that say "Not in our name." There's a difference between solidarity and unity. A lot of times I hear people say, I want unity. I used to say that too. But then as I got older, I realized, sometimes it's just not enough to have unity, right? Like sometimes you need solidarity. And what they are doing here, Jewish Voices for Peace, this is solidarity. Solidarity is when you put someone else's needs before your own. And I'll also add at the end of that, and you don't ask for anything in return. Okay, that's solidarity. When we were at the George Floyd protest, white comrades, Palestinian comrades who were out there protesting with us, that was solidarity. They were putting our needs before their own. And we need to see more of that. The people, white people who protested with civil rights protesters during the civil rights movement, that was solidarity. You'd think Bernie Sanders know a thing or two about that since he was one of the people out there protesting with black people. You'd think he'd understand that. How easily some of these people forget where they were when they were this age. And that's what we need to see more of. Now, why were they there? It's not the first time they've been protesting against this, but part of the reason why they were there is because of the events that happened in Gaza over the weekend. I want to touch on what World Socialist website said first, and then we're going to talk about some of the events that transpired. It says thousands of supporters of Jewish Voice for Peace occupy Grand Central Station in New York City to protest genocide in Gaza. And there were also people outside too. This is another thing I wanted to show you. It wasn't just people inside of Grand Central Station. On Friday evening, a spontaneous action of civil disobedience by thousands of supporters of the organization Jewish Voice for Peace shut down Grand Central Station in Manhattan to protest the escalating genocide against Gaza. The NYPD arrested several of the protesters, but thousands then gathered outside. So I just want to tell you, number one, kudos for putting this together as quickly as they did and getting a tremendous turnout, because for those of us that are organizers and those of us that try hard to get a lot of numbers for people to show up at rallies, sometimes it's difficult to get a large turnout. Sometimes that's depending on like the day that you plan the protest, the time, right? That kind of thing. So we usually announce those far in advance. From what I understand, this was spontaneous. So this was announced that day and thousands of people came out. So kudos to them. Chants included Biden, you can't hide. We charge you with genocide. And from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. The demonstration showed widespread pro-Palestinian sympathies among the public, including Jewish workers and youth who packed the main floor of the terminal during rush hour. And there's a woman there with the sign that says, "Let Gaza live." The protesters also unfurled banners from the mezzanine that read, "Palestinians should be free and Israelis demand ceasefire now." A large number of the participants wore black t-shirts from JVP that said, "Not in our name," and "Ceasefire now." World Socialist website spoke with several of those participating. So one of the protesters said, "I'm horrified. They're a wolf in sheep's clothing. Biden is no better than Bush." Hang on to that one. Biden is no better than Bush. In fact, I think he's worse, if that was possible. The fact that these are the choices that we have, there is something seriously wrong. And this is where I say that a third party or independent candidate can actually make some noise. Now, why were they there? Part of the reason they were there because of what happened over the weekend. And shout out to Al Jazeera because they're trying to shut them down too, you guys. Just FYI, if you're not aware. Israel intensifies Gaza bombardment as internet and phone services go down. Israel has intensified its bombardment of the besieged Gaza Strip as internet and mobile communication services collapsed in the Palestinian territory. An extended series of large explosions lit up the sky over Gaza City after nightfall on Friday. And an Al Jazeera correspondent said northern Gaza was being pounded by air raids and artillery. Twitter was a tough thing to look at Friday night. It was tough, like seeing the videos, which I can't play on here. But essentially, the Palestinian people in Gaza were left in the dark and they cut off communications. So if you cut off communications, you can't contact the ambulance to come and rescue people. This isn't just about internet. How is that not a war crime? This is what they did. Cut off communications. Even the journalists were like, they're cutting off all communication, meaning they have no way to get the word out. The journalists have no way to show you what's happening. How is that not a war crime? Well, what are you trying to hide? Let's continue. The Palestine Red Crescent Society said it had completely lost contact with its operations room in Gaza and all its teams operating on the ground. Israeli military spokesman Daniel Hagari said Israel increased air raids in a very significant way and that ground forces were expanding their activity in Gaza. He told residents of Gaza City to move south on Friday night as escalating Israeli attacks battered the strip. In the last 2 hours, we could hear intensive airstrikes and intensive artillery shells at the same time, which is something unusual, which means the strength of the fire is much more than in the previous days. This was a massacre. This was a slaughter. And the US government is funding it. One thing that former President Barack Obama did say in his statement is that even though there is a war going on, he said that Israel still has to obey the rules of war, which is that you should not be committing war crimes. You should not be using white phosphorus, for one. But they're not doing that. Why would you obey the rules of war if one of the biggest governments in the world tells you that they will support you unequivocally and that they have unwavering support for you? Why would you follow the rules? Let's go on. Today is the worst in terms of the strength of the Israeli fire. And we can hear some explosions coming from the sea as well, specifically in the north of the Gaza Strip. The airstrikes and the artillery shells are intensifying now in the north. The Palestinian telecommunication company Jawal said in a social media post late on Friday that mobile phone and internet services have been shut off. We don't have any internet. We don't have any kind of signals on our phones. We've become totally isolated in the territory. That's from Al Jazeera Tariq Abu Azum, reported from Khan Yunis in Gaza on Friday. Residents were terrified and afraid, he said. So imagine that. Now, again, you can see the videos on Twitter. I'm not going to show them on here because YouTube be tripping. Okay. So I'm not going to show them on here. But essentially, these people were just trying to find their way through the dark. Now, an unsurprising ally, Elon Musk of all people, offered to restore connectivity to Gaza. Listen to this. This is from the Jerusalem Post. Elon Musk to provide Starlink connectivity to aid orgs in Gaza. This news comes in the wake of a report from NetBlocks that the internet connectivity had largely collapsed in the Hamas-controlled enclave. I'm not sure why they used that picture of Elon. He just looks like really shocked there. Elon Musk stated that the SpaceX-owned satellite internet constellation Starlink will support internet connectivity to internationally recognized aid organizations in Gaza. So this is coming from Elon Musk. I was surprised by this. Starlink will support connectivity to internationally recognized aid organizations in Gaza, Musk wrote. So this comes after AOC's post, where she said cutting off all communication to a population of 2.2 million is unacceptable. Journalists, medical professionals, humanitarian efforts, and innocents are all endangered. I do not know how such an act can be defended. The United States has historically denounced this practice. Yeah, but you endorsed Joe Biden. Joe Biden seems to be okay with it. But Elon responded and said Starlink will support connectivity to internationally recognized aid organizations in Gaza. And AOC was responding to this message here from Hussam. He said, I have been trying to reach my family in Gaza for hours with no success. All telecommunications and internet have been cut, while Israeli strikes is literally destroying Gaza from air, land, and sea. How many more innocent people, children, parents, and grandparents will be murdered before the world steps in? Again, the Palestinian people have nowhere to go. You got to remember they're fenced in. Israel controls the air, the land, and the sea. What are they supposed to do? They can't leave. Now, what was really interesting during all of this, watching all of this Friday night, Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield, Now, all of a sudden, she feels some type of sympathy when she's partially to blame to what's happening to the Palestinian civilians. She said, we must not become numb to the pain and the suffering of people like Al-Dula, a Palestinian journalist whose wife, son, daughter, and grandson were killed in Gaza this week. The lives of innocent Palestinians must be protected. The lives of UN personnel and humanitarian workers and journalists must be protected. We mourn the loss of every single innocent life in this crisis, every single one. And now, why is this a problem? I'm about to show you. That's why. Because Wyatt Reed, Wyatt Reed called it out. He said, you are directly responsible for this. And he pointed out this piece here. On Wednesday, the U.S. was the only country to vote no on a proposed UN Security Council resolution authored by Brazil that called for humanitarian pauses in Israel's bombing of Gaza. 12 countries voted for the resolution, including several surprising ones, such as France and the United Arab Emirates. Two more, Russia and the UK, abstained. But according to the Security Council rules, America's sole no vote meant that the resolution failed. You guys see that? America said no. That's why, this is why I say Joe Biden has blood on his hands. This country has blood on their hands. What you saw on Twitter, all those videos of the strikes, the airstrikes Friday night, America has blood on their hands. Because if America would have voted yes, along with France, one of our allies, and the UAE, those people could have been saved. So Wyatt Reed was right to call her out. And it goes on to say Human Rights Watch criticized America's actions, saying, once again, the U.S. cynically used their veto to prevent the UN Security Council from acting on Israel and Palestine at a time of unprecedented carnage. And this is where I say the UN should be able to step in and veto that. Because I want you to pretend it was us. Imagine if it was us being attacked. How would you feel? America, US was the only sole no vote. This is where I feel like the UN should have more authority and be able to come in and say, nah, this has got to stop. But there's a reason why all this is happening. We're going to get to that in just a second as well. There's also students being threatened. This is from Mohammed Shihada. Israeli Arab students are hiding inside Netanya College, caged by a mob of hundreds of Israelis who are blocking the entrance, waving flags and threatening them. Israeli Arabs are becoming increasingly targeted, harassed, and fearing for their lives at Israeli college campuses. So you see this? So you see that? So the Arab students are afraid to come out. Now, not everyone feels this way. Not everyone agrees with what Netanyahu is doing. I'm going to say this again. Not everyone, and particularly Israelis, agree with what Netanyahu is doing. And I want to show you proof of that. This is from Solomon. Breaking: Israelis ask for Netanyahu to resign if he does not do a prisoner exchange. Hundreds of settlers demonstrated in front of Netanyahu's residence, demanding that he resign. and conclude an exchange deal to return Israeli prisoners from Gaza. Look at this. These are the people that want Netanyahu to resign. And this goes back to another thing, and I'll need to see if I can bring Garland Nixon back on again, because this is one of the things I think that someone told me Garland Nixon had predicted that Netanyahu is over, like politically is over. So this goes to show you. And again, Miko Polite explained this to me as well last time he was on. Is like, I don't want you guys to think that everybody there agrees with what he's doing. Yep. So I wanted you to see that. So it could be that politically things are changing for Netanyahu. Now, when we talk about the occupation of the Palestinian people, Danny Haifong put this so beautifully, because I told you I wanted you to think about how indigenous people were colonized in the United States. Now, Danny actually posted a map I want you to see. Danny said, look familiar? Palestine is not the first time a colonial entity bent on genocide and land theft committed unspeakable war crimes. The U.S. government backs Israel based on a common bond of atrocities. Check it out, folks. Native land stolen since 1776. And this is what I was telling you about colonialism spreads. The goal is not just to occupy one place. So when Europeans came to North America, if we look at 1776, at that point, it looks like the occupation was just part of the East Coast, almost all of the East Coast. And then there's part of Texas and part of Louisiana down here, right? The rest of it, still native land. 1850, look at how it shifts, right? The red is the native land. 1894, just little spots, little pockets. And then 2017. Okay. So the gray is the land that was taken from the indigenous people. And this is why I continue to tell you, nobody says, hey, I'm going to go take this land over there and just is happy with that amount of land. The goal is always to expand. History shows us that. And that's also the same thing when we look at what's happening with Israel. Now, some people blame the expansion on religion. Some people blame it on, ethnic cleansing. I would say it's a little bit of both of those, although it looks more like ethnic cleansing to me, because when we talk about the Ethiopian Jews, remember, they're trying to get them out too. They don't want them there either. So it's not just about religion. But apparently, it sure as hell is also about resources. And I want you to see what lies on the Gaza Strip. The unrealized potential of Palestinian oil and gas reserves. Well. Oil and natural gas resources in the occupied Palestinian territory could generate hundreds of billions of dollars for development. Geologists and resource economists have confirmed that the occupied Palestinian territory lies above sizable reservoirs of oil and natural gas wealth in Area C of the West Bank and the Mediterranean coast off the Gaza Strip, according to a recent UNCTAD study. What'd I tell you, folks? When we talked about what's happening in Ethiopia and people trying to push out people in Ethiopia, I told you the resources that they had in Ethiopia. When we talk about the US government occupying a third of Syria, it just so happens to be the part of Syria where there's oil. Whoops. Always about resources. This is why I said they want them out and they want them not coming back to return. So even if Egypt would have opened up their borders and said, come on over here, you fam, they wouldn't be able to return, bruh. This is what I want you guys to understand. Even if Egypt opened the borders and said, come on over here, they would not have been able to return back to Gaza. All about resources, bruh. All about resources. I'm going to make this a little bit larger so you can see. New discoveries of natural gas in the Levant Basin are in the range of 122 trillion cubic foot, while recoverable oil is estimated at 1.7 billion barrels, according to the study entitled by the economic cost of occupation for the Palestinian people, the unrealized oil and natural gas potential. This offers an opportunity to redistribute and share about US dollars. They put that together. You guys got a typo. About US 524 billion among the different parties in the region and promote peace and cooperation among old belligerents, the study notes. Let me say something, folks. This is why they didn't take any of the agreements. This is why they didn't vote yes for the Arab Peace Initiative from 2002. They don't want a two-state solution. This is why. They want the resources. Goes on to say here, these funds could finance socioeconomic development in the OPT as part of the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. However, so far, the Palestinian people have been prohibited from exploiting the oil and gas reserves in their own land and water to meet energy needs and generate fiscal and export revenues. This increases both the opportunity cost and the total cost borne by the Palestinian people as a result of occupation, the study states. Eric, can we put the link to this article in the chat so people can continue to read the rest of this? Resources, folks. Resources. And then this piece right here. The cost. Israel's exploitation of Palestinian natural resources, including oil and natural gas, imposes on the Palestinian people's enormous costs that escalate as the occupation remains in effect. The study cautions. The study comes ahead of the release of UNCTAD's report on its assistance to the Palestinian people slated for September 10th. Eric has actually just put the link to this article in the chat. Please pass it on to your friends. Everybody need to see this. But there's more, because I told you about expansion and I forgot to include this one from Richie. Oh shit, I didn't forgot Richie's last name. Oh, this is bad. Medhurst. I know, guys, I'm terrible with names sometimes. Don't come for me. Don't come for me. Why can't I find Richie Medhurst on Twitter? Ready? Is Richie gone? He was there a minute ago. Oh, let me get rid of the T. Found him. That's definitely not Richie Medhurst. Do you guys know what happened to Richie Medhurst? I can't find him on Twitter. I don't know what happened. Unless I'm just not looking correctly. Maybe I have the wrong name. Maybe I typed it in wrong. Richie. I bet you I'm spelling Medhurst wrong. How much you want to bet? I don't know what's going on, man. But like when I search his name, you know what? I bet you they blacklisted him on Twitter. I bet you they did, man. This is crazy. This is wild. I can't find him. What is it, Eric? Oh, he doesn't spell it that way. Okay. Oh, he doesn't use. Oh, okay. Thanks, Eric. Sorry, guys. Sorry. I want to show you this from Richie. I hope I didn't alarm anybody there. Okay. Yeah, he doesn't spell it the same way. All right. I want to show you something that he posted when he said what this is really about. Hope I can find. Yeah, I found it. All right. Okay. Bear with me. Sorry, guys. I'm usually more prepared than this, but I forgot about this one. You need to see the first 2 minutes of this. I think you need to see it if you haven't. Okay, here we go. Whoopsies. Sorry. Didn't mean to scare you guys.
Really happening in Gaza and why it is happening. A few weeks ago, right before this war in Gaza ignites, Netanyahu goes to the United Nations General Assembly and he holds up this map and declares his plan for a new Middle East. And people are going, what is this stupid line this guy's drawing with a red marker? What it is an economic corridor that stretches all the way from India to the United Arab Emirates, into Saudi Arabia, into Jordan, Israel, and then finally to the entire European continent. I mean, the United...
Pause there. You see this line? You see what's happening, right? From Italy, there's the boot, all the way through the Middle East. And this would go all the way across to China. Let me let him finish.
The United States at this point, seeing their influence starting to fade, seeing the relevance of the dollar recede after they stole $300 billion from Russia. You have all these spooks in Washington and Tel Aviv, running around desperately trying to counter BRICS and counter China's new Silk Road. And this is their answer. This is a rival to the new Silk Road. Remember, the ancient Silk Road is the largest, most important trade route in human history. This thing is enormous. It stretches all the way from China to Syria to the Mediterranean Sea. The Chinese know how important this thing is and they want to revive it. It is the future of world economics, trade, and politics. Within the span of a few weeks, Iran and Iraq have signed a railway deal. So now you have a rail link for the new Silk Road. And President Assad of Syria, who the West have been trying to isolate for over a decade, is now visiting China, the world's largest economy, and signing a strategic partnership. This is pivotal. So now the new Silk Road has rail access all the way to the Mediterranean Sea through Syria's port in Latakia. So
through whose port? Syria's port. And here's Lebanon. So remember what I told you last week. Israel has been bombing Lebanon and Syria.
Not just land, but maritime trade. This is crucial. And as enormous and important as all of this is just one aspect. This is just one aspect. You still have the gas. How can we talk about the Middle East without talking about gas and oil? When the US instigated the Maidan coup in 2014, that wasn't just about NATO expansion and encirclement of Russia. This was about surrounding, controlling, and cutting off Russian gas to Europe. Russia is the country with the largest proven reserves of natural gas. Control Ukraine, and you control the pipelines that feed and supply Russian gas to Europe. For decades, you've had US politicians, Republican and Democrat, from every administration, openly saying on camera, we don't want Nord Stream.
There will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
You want to have pipelines that don't go through Ukraine and Russia.
You guys see this? I'm not going to play the whole thing. But Eric, you can put the link in there in the chat so they can see the rest. But guys, this is what we've been saying for a long time. At the end of the day, it comes down to resources. So when Netanyahu gave that speech about the greater Israel, which we've covered before on this show, this is what it's all about. Pass that on to your friends.